Welcome to the Photo Flunky Show, episode number 71. Today we're going to be asking the question, how much post-processing is too much? So, those of you that are really into the funky HDR, this show's for you. Hi, my name is William Beem.
My name is Lee Beem.
And we're going to be talking about, or asking the question, how much post-processing is too much? And as usual, Lee and I kind of disagree on a few points. But
yeah.
it wouldn't be any fun if we agreed on everything.
It wouldn't.
Before we get started, I just want to say show notes are going to be available at williambeam.com/episode 71. And of course, you can find a transcript of the show there for free. Links to subscribe will be on that page, and as well as on photoflunky.com, you'll find our podcast player with this and all of our previous episodes and links to subscribe. Finally, get your free ebook. I've got an ebook called Creative Portraits. It is about the emotional and creative side of portraiture, not the technical side. And it's yours for free. Go to williambeam.com/freebook, or if you want to, just whip out your phone and text the phrase CP book to the number 33444. So what we really want to do is talk about post-processing for your photographs. How much is too much? And this kind of all came about something that you brought up to me the other night.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that there were people who said, if you have to take your photograph to Photoshop, it's cheating.
Yep, that was my introduction to photography. So I spent my first, I'd say maybe 18 months not using any processing whatsoever on my photos. I just assumed because I was a beginner, my photos looked crap.
And that's something that I just kind of wanted to get out there. Is like, there are people who think that post-processing is cheating. It's a little misguided because all photos need some kind of post-processing.
Yes.
How much you do depends upon the genre of photography that you're in. And are you documenting something or are you telling a creative story? But the idea that no post-processing whatsoever is valid is invalid to me, because the simple fact is, if you take a photograph as a JPEG, there's post-processing happening inside the camera.
Yes, there is. And you can set it to really crank that up as well.
If you want to go with a vivid, if you want to go with a landscape, you want to go with a portrait, that means that whatever camera you're using, the manufacturer has determined what algorithms they're going to use for post-processing, and they are applying it to every photograph that you take when you've got that setting applied.
See, now that's really cheating because somebody else has post-processed for you.
Well, it's not only cheating, it's ignorant. You don't even know what creating the results that you get.
That's also true.
Which a number of photographers these days and for the past few years like to shoot RAW, because RAW is not a photograph. It is simply a collection of data from which you can extract and create a photograph.
Mm-hmm.
JPEG, every JPEG has got some kind of post-processing in it. It may be flat, it may be bright, it may be oversaturated, but there's some kind of post-processing. So the idea that post-processing is cheating, I'm sorry, I just reject that out of hand.
Yeah, and I had to come around to that. I was kind of slow in getting around to it, and I think taking fireworks photos was when I really realized, hang on a second, let's do something with this, because I had set my camera on very specific instructions and guidance. I had followed them to the letter. I had practiced. I felt like I'd done everything right. The photos were sharp, but somehow it just wasn't, the finished result wasn't exactly as I'd seen it in the live event.
It wasn't as magical as what you saw during the time. It didn't capture the essence of what you saw.
It really didn't.
So therefore, it really wasn't an accurate representation or capture of what you saw.
That's right. And do you know that I took those, initially it was a while, I'd taken those photos in JPEG before I came around to this idea. So that wasn't even RAW files that are generally flat and need some sharpening and enhancements. So I guess this collection of information that I processed myself in my mind over time made me come to the realization that, hang on a second, just because everybody else is saying something doesn't make it so.
No, it doesn't. And this is why I kind of wanted to bring it up, because particularly for new photographers that are hearing a lot of advice or reading it on forums, this is bad advice. It is extremely bad advice, because everything you do with a camera affects how it comes out. There's no reason why you can't do something in post-processing to affect how the photograph comes out. And that is, at a minimum, you need to sharpen your images.
Yes.
But your lens selection is going to cause different levels of distortion of what you saw.
That's right.
It's also going to affect the colors of what you saw. The sensor that you have, the ISO settings that you have, all these little things are going to affect the image that you come out with. I have yet to see a photo where I just snap it and out of the result of the camera comes exactly what I saw.
This is true.
So,
especially because we always shoot RAW now.
We always shoot RAW, and I've got a bunch of old photos from before I knew enough to shoot RAW and I was shooting JPEG. I thought, I really wish I could go back. I can do some things with them, but I really wish I'd kept the RAW files.
Yeah.
What post-processing is important to all photos? At the very least, sharpening, I would say. all photos need to be sharpened.
They do. And generally, unless you're using a gray card, almost all photos, I would say, need some kind of white balance adjustment.
Yeah. And the funny thing about white balance is it happens after the photo's taken. Because if you've got the raw data, you can kind of take it any which way you want to. If you're shooting in JPEG and the camera's applying a white balance, it's going to be based upon the settings you have on your camera.
Yes.
So you may be able to change somewhat the color temperature or white balance, but it can be used for a creative choice or it can be used as a documentary choice.
That's right. And if you document things, you want them as accurate as possible.
And if you can't do that, just make everything black and white.
Yes.
But that's a choice in itself. It's like, I made this photo black and white. Is it real? Because I didn't see it in black and white.
Well,
But I mean, for decades, journalistic photos were in black and white.
yes.
And yet that was acceptable. No one thought about that was post-processing.
It was acceptable because everybody was doing it.
Exactly. So the idea that post-processing is cheating, I just want to dispel that myth completely.
Yes.
Post-processing is not cheating. However, there are things that are acceptable for some genres of photography that are not acceptable for others. So I'm going to suggest that adding some contrast, adding some sharpness, and maybe even lens correction is acceptable for any genre of photography.
Yes.
Where you start stepping over the line for some genres is where you start distorting what was in the image.
Well, I call it manipulating the photo. If I have to really manipulate the photograph and things change dramatically from what really was there and what I saw to what I'm putting out in the final result of the post-processing, that to me is manipulation. And that's not to say that I don't agree with it. It's just that I don't choose that for my photos because mine are generally taken with the intention of sharing what I saw.
Well, let's take a look at, let's say, journalistic intent. You're taking a photograph. Can you crop the image down? And in some cases, yes, you can, because, if something extraneous is in there, you want to crop it down so you can show the intent of what you're documenting. I think a crop is fine. If you use a crop in order to remove somebody from a photograph, then you're kind of changing history of like who was there or who was part of the scene.
Yes.
That's a manipulation. I think that the intent is not so much the tools that you use inside of post-processing. It is, what is your intent? Is it impacting or deceiving the viewer?
Yes, but then you can look at it, like you mentioned, in camera.
Mm-hmm.
So if you crop and remove somebody and you're changing who was there, you could zoom and remove somebody and change who was there. If you think about this, there's just so many variables in here, but I think it gives you an idea of how big and complicated this can be and how simple it really is.
I think you're right. It's like you can make this as big or as little of an issue as you want to. And most of us, I think, that are listening to the show probably aren't doing this as journalists. I think we're doing this as art or as travel photography or something that's we're doing for our own entertainment. Maybe we're doing client shots as well. Those are things where you know where your subject is and you kind of know where the lines are. Every once in a while, you get close to a line. And it's like, did I step over or not?
Yes.
So, for example, travel photography. We go off to, again, I say this all the time, we go off to Walt Disney World and we take photos out there. If we decide that we want to remove some people who are in the way of our shots, is that stepping over the line?
To me, it's not. It depends also. I like people in my shots, but I also don't want somebody's gaping wide open mouth mid-yawn on the left-hand side of my photo, distracting from the subject.
And again, for that travel photo, it depends. What is your intent? Are you publishing this for saying, I was here and I saw, this scene, one of the attractions or something, one of the vignettes, that maybe Disney set up? Or are you publishing this and that person is part of the story?
Something else that I do, and this is going to sound crazy, but I've learned that, I take a lot of iPhone photos for my own little social media sites that I've got going up. I have learned that I often don't have something white in my photo. iPhone doesn't usually get the white balance right. So what I often have is something white just in the little corner, like maybe a piece of paper in my hand. And I've learned to have something, or, I'll take off my shoe that maybe has a white shoelace and I just have it in the corner. I intend to crop this out and I allow for it, but that's so I can fix the white balance. It's the silliest thing, but I have to mess with it because the iPhone does not get it right. And there are certain things like somebody's face or pictures of food. You don't want food to be in the wrong temperature, and I tend to warm it up a little bit, but I want to control that, and I need to have it correct as a starting point before I start to put my own kind of feel into it.
Okay, for the photography that you do, was either travel or food photography,
mm-hmm.
what's the line for you? What will you do and what won't you do?
I will enhance what I saw. I will enhance colors. I will sharpen. I will denoise because sometimes maybe the ISO is high or maybe the light wasn't that great. So I'll do things like that. I'll change the white balance. I always do some the lens correction, profile corrections. That's usually where I start when I hit Lightroom, which is all that I use for my post-processing from my camera. Lightroom generally doesn't manipulate your images. I'm not going to go with, like the grainy effects. I'm not going to hit up the clarity. I'm very careful with the clarity slider because it gives it that kind of grungy look.
It can get, very crunchy.
It look, kind of like, too textured for me. Some things work with that. There are always exceptions, but I would say 99% of the time, if I touch clarity, it's a gentle nudge.
Are you looking at your photos as artistic or as something like here I was?
I like to look at it as an artistic take on here I was, but I like the artistic side of it to be how I saw it and how I present it rather than what I'm doing to my images to make it artistic.
So you want to show what you saw, and specifically with your composition, the way you saw it, the way you want to present it to someone else.
That's right.
And then you want to enhance that just a little bit, just kind of feel the punch and presence like you were.
That's exactly what I do. I enhance it. There are some things that I fix that you cannot fix in the iPhone or get 100% correct in camera. So, like I say, the white balance, a little bit of sharpening, things like that. I've got no problem with doing that.
Do you have any problem removing an object if you see that, if you didn't see it when you were there, but then suddenly say, oh, that doesn't belong?
I don't really have a problem removing an object. Maybe somebody's finger got into the bottom corner of your frame or something blew into the side. Yeah, you want to get rid of that because it's a distraction. That's also an important part of presenting your photo and finishing it. You may need to crop it. You may choose to remove it because you don't want to, kill something else in there by cropping. But I don't want to start cloning things in and cloning things out and doing all kinds of things. That's because the type of photos that I take.
You don't clone things in and out. Now, you also do like your scrapbooking and you like doing kind of compositing things.
I do.
Where you'll pull out maybe a subject out of a photograph and put it in basically a new composition.
Yes, but I'm not presenting that as a photograph. I am presenting that very clearly as a scrapbook, which is made up of elements that I have put together. So I'm not trying to pass it off as this is how the scene was when I saw it. I'm saying these are elements of things that go together for the story I'm telling here. And I have put them together specifically, and it's really blatantly obvious in the way that I've done it, that these things were extracted from different sources.
Yeah, that's true, because it's like you'd never take a photograph that looks like one of your scrapbook kind of compositions.
There's nothing. There is nothing as chaotic in this entire world.
You're right. Nothing exists that looks like that. So it's kind of like, those old Monty Python things, where somebody's mouth would unhinge and come way down.
Yeah, but do you know what? That's what I love. I choose to use my scrapbooking as a release for that kind of crazy, no limits creativity.
All right. Now, as far as photography, I am on the other end. I will manipulate a lot of things.
Yes.
It's like, for example, of my portrait work these days, I like to shoot a model on a clean background, like, a white or gray background, and then composite the model onto maybe something else that I've shot or another scene. That in itself is a manipulation that you could not get away with in journalism. In other words, you don't get to take a picture of the president here and then put him on top of a nuclear missile in Russia.
No.
At least not call it journalism. Now, comedy or something else like that, maybe parody. A lot of people are doing that on Facebook. But as far as the photograph, I don't think that when I'm doing portrait photography that I have to be limited to just where the person was standing.
No, you're right. But the reason for that is pretty obvious to me. Your photograph is to present the subject. Your model is clearly the core subject of the photo. The background never features in the subject. You actually want as little attention as possible to the background. So you are choosing a background to enhance your subject, just like you might use vibrance or clarity or something on a different type of photo to enhance your subject. You're doing something different, and compositing does lend itself well to things like that. It does depend on what you're doing.
But I'm doing even more. If I can take a photograph of a model and show him or her exactly as the camera captured them, but that's still not the way you perceive them, because like when the light flashes and every little pore, every little defect on someone's face becomes glaringly obvious because it's a still photo that's really well lit and sharp. And you start to see things that you don't notice when you're talking to someone face to face. And that's why we come back and I will remove those imperfections. I will do skin smoothing to an extent. I don't want to remove their pores, but you want to kind of balance out the skin tones. I might go further. If I've got a model and I decided that, I want to try a couple things, I might enlarge the eyes. You may not notice this, but when you're looking at a lot of magazine covers, look how big the eyes are on some of those models. They're not the same as what the photograph was taken on. A lot of cases, you will see people's nose slimmed down. You'll see their eyes enlarged because you engage with their eyes, so they make that a little bit bigger to kind of draw you in. And of course, there's other things as far as liquefying. People resize someone's shape, whether it be their hips, their bust, or their jawline, their arms, any number of things. You'll find that there's all sorts of manipulations that go on in advertisements and magazine covers. Mm-hmm. Are those over the line?
I've got my own views on that for advertisements and magazine covers, but that's not really from an art perspective. But I think what you're doing, like you actually explained exactly why it is, to me, it is not manipulation to do this with, when you maybe minimize the exaggeration of the pores and every fine hair and every mark on the skin. As you said, when you're looking at somebody in real life, you're not looking with all these lights on that are highlighting things. It's like going into a changing room. I mean, you look in the mirror there and suddenly you've got bumps and bulges and things. You don't normally look like that to the naked eye when somebody sees you. And you are actually bringing things back closer to reality than what they are under those lights that expose absolutely everything.
You can, but there is a line, and it's not something you can say this line exists for every specific photo, but for each photo, you have to decide for yourself what the line is. If you're brightening someone's eyes, like the eye whites, or the whites of the eye too bright,
yeah.
Or is the iris too bright? Did you change the color of someone's iris? And when you start getting into that stuff, you are manipulating, and it's no longer the person that you captured.
Yeah.
And skin smoothing that goes too far, or makeup that goes too far beyond what they were wearing, because you can put all sorts of makeup on somebody in post-processing.
You can.
And you can really slim someone down to the point that the person would look at the photograph and say, that's not me.
Well, that's right. And when I look at something like that, my thought is, couldn't you get the model that you needed?
Sometimes you can't.
Well, I love a bit of enhancement. You've taken a few portraits of me and all you've done is made me look like me, but nicer. I'm quite happy with that. If you suddenly started giving me long eyelashes, a slim nose, which I don't have, if you took all the lines out of my face completely that I looked like I was 20, which I'm not. Yeah, it might look like a pretty photo, but that's not me. I don't want that. I need to look like me, because when anybody who knows me looks at that photo, they're going to go, that's not her.
Yeah. And that's the problem I'm running into now is I've got my profile photo is from 2011. So it's 6 years old. And I ran into somebody a couple of years ago and says, well, you don't look like that. I thought, well, thanks. That was her very first words to me.
You don't look like your photo.
I've got to take a new profile photo because apparently I don't look like mine anymore. It's just one of those things, like you can't really say where the line is on that genre, but there's a line when you've crossed it.
Yes.
And I think the same thing is true for every other kind of genre. If you're taking something that's supposed to be street photography, or if it's supposed to be a journalistic or documentary kind of photography, you're not going to go manipulate that photo and then expect to get it published in
National Geographic or something.
Yeah, they're just not going to take it. They're going to accept, like, maybe you enhance the colors, maybe you add a little bit of contrast and sharpen it. But in other words, you need to get things as close to right in camera as you can. There is the reasonable thought that the camera doesn't do everything.
And this is true. The camera does not do everything. It does the best it can, and it does a great job most of the time. Sometimes it's as simple as you didn't get your settings right.
That's our advice, is do the best you can to get your shot correct in camera. I mean, take your time, do your composition, make sure your settings are right. But please don't feel like post-processing is cheating, because every photograph is going to need some form of post-processing. Thank you for listening to the Photo Flunky Show. Show notes are going to be available at williambeem.com/episode 71. And of course, you can find a transcript of the show there for free. We would love it if you would subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play Music, Blueberry, Stitcher Radio, and maybe a couple of others. We have links on the show notes, or also you can subscribe at photoflunky.com. Finally, don't forget to claim your free copy of Creative Portraits at williambeem.com/freebook, or you can text the phrase CP book to the number 33444. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. We'll see you again next week.